Hey there, and welcome back to Tim Talks Cooking. Today, we are talking, now get this, you might want to put your seatbelt on. We are talking vegan corned beef, my friend. You heard me right. That's slow cooker, vegan corned beef. And I've even keto-fied it for you from a recipe that was written by a gal named Brittany Roche, who writes from a blog called plantpowercouple.com. And I'll put a link to that on the description below. Well, you may be wondering, what's with the fake corned beef, Tim? Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, I bought a lot of Seitan, so I want to use it up. But it's really a very interesting product to work with. I love vegan cooking, even though I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian. And so let's just experiment with it and see what we end up with. I think this is going to be good. So, tell you what, let's get started. I think you might be surprised to learn that making seitan and making it taste like corned beef is really not that much more complicated than making beef taste like corned beef. Here are the ingredients you're going to need for this recipe. First of all, it starts off with a cup plus 2 tablespoons of vital wheat gluten. That's seitan. I'm also going to use 3 tablespoons of chickpea flour, 1 tablespoon of erythritol. Brittany Roche uses high-carb ingredients for those two. I'm going to use low-carb ones here. I also have 1/3 cup of melted coconut oil. This is organic, refined coconut oil. You use whatever kind of coconut oil you like. We're also going to need some flavorings, obviously, to make this taste like corned beef. We've got here a 1/2 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. I've got a teaspoon of kosher salt here in the middle. 1/4 teaspoon each of ground mustard, ground allspice, and ground cinnamon. Then a 1/2 teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, and ground cumin. Next, you're going to need 2 jars. I've got 2 pint jars of my home canned beets, or you can buy 2 cans in the grocery store of sliced beets. To process the beets, first simply strain them and reserve the liquid. We're going to need that for the brine. Drain your beets well, and then remove them to the bowl of your food processor or blender. We'll puree them until they're smooth, and we may need to simply wipe down the bowl once or twice. This is going to be what gives our seitan the color, the red color of corned beef. To make the seitan, we're going to start by combining all of our dry ingredients. There's our chickpea flour, the erythritol, and our spices. Get those all in there. Mix them together. Just makes everything nicer, and it'll mean that in the end, all of these things will be combined much more evenly. Now we're going to add the wet ingredients. Make a bit of a well here in the middle. In goes the beets. That's 2/3 cup of the pureed beets. We're going to need the rest of the pureed beets later on in the recipe. We also have here 1/3 cup of melted coconut oil. You'll see there's not much to it here. The gluten is very powdery at first. I'm going to get it combined with the liquids gently. And once we do, it's going to start firming up really pretty quickly. And then we're going to turn it out onto our board and knead it for about 1 minute to 2 minutes. You don't want to over knead this. It will make it tough. And we want our final product to be tender. Very much like corned beef. Okay. As you can see, that's formed a nice stiff dough. I'm just going to turn it out onto my board and knead it just like I would bread for 1 minute. And after about 1.5 minutes of kneading, here's what we end up with. It's actually kind of greasy. It looks, and to me, smells very much like corned beef. Look at that color. It's even kind of stringy like corned beef. That's pretty cool. Now, our next step, we're going to do just what we would do with beef, and that is to cover it with a rub. I've got here a sheet of plastic that I'm just going to put down here. And I've made a rub here with 1/4 teaspoon of ground mustard, 1/4 teaspoon of ground allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. I'm just going to mix them together kind of casually there. And I'm going to sprinkle some out on my plastic. Put my seitan in there, sprinkle the rest over the top. I'm just going to kind of roll it around a little bit, cover it in that rub on all sides. Now I'm going to wrap this up. Doesn't have to be tightly necessarily. It's not going to expand or anything really. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up and let those flavors marry in the fridge for an hour. You could leave it in there overnight as well. I'm just going to leave it in there for just an hour. And just as if we were preparing beef, we're going to make a brine here. I've got 2 cups of the liquid from the beets. I'm going to add a cup of water to that. I'm also going to add in here 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar. Have half a teaspoon each of whole allspice and whole yellow mustard seeds, plus a teaspoon of kosher salt and a half a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Got 4 big cloves of garlic that I've minced very finely. And the rest of the beets, the rest of the beet puree, that's probably about 2/3 of a cup or a little more maybe. We're just going to mix this together. Here I've transferred the brine to my Instant Pot and I've set it on the slow cooker setting on low. We're going to let this warm up while our seitan marinates in the refrigerator. Just going to put the lid on. Make sure your lid is set to venting, not to sealing. My brine's been warming up here for about an hour while my seitan marinated in the refrigerator. And in fact, you know, when I looked at the quantity of this, I said to myself, that's really enough to do more than 1 seitan loaf here. So I made a second one, and we're going to go ahead and put that one in there too. Get 2 for the cooking time of 1 here. You know, whenever you can cook twice as much in the same amount of time, I say go ahead and do it. I've got my 2 little loaves of seitan in there. They don't need to necessarily be covered. I'm just going to splash some of that on there. Great. Now, I'm going to put the lid back on slow cook on the low setting for 2 hours. Okay, it's been 2 hours now, and we're just going to turn our loaves over here. I guess we should call them our roasts. There we go. Now we're going to put the lid on and give them another 2 hours on low. Again, make sure your pressure valve is turned not to sealing, but to venting when you use the slow cooker. All right, it's been 2 hours now. 4 hours total. And let's have a look. They look pretty much like they did when they went in there. Maybe a little puffier. Look at that. Now we're going to remove them to a greased baking dish. I've used extra virgin olive oil for this one. And in they go to a 275-degree oven with a little bit of this brine on top for about 45 minutes. Then we're going to turn them over and roast them for 45 more minutes after that. My timer's just gone off. The first 45 minutes are up. Let's see what we've got. Here we go. I've got my 2 roasts here side by side. We're going to turn them over. We're going to spoon on just a little bit more of this brine. And this will be the last use of the brine here. We'll discard the rest of it. I don't believe it'll be very good as a sauce. And I just want to get enough on to cover it. And then we're going to re-season a little bit. A little salt, a little kosher salt, of course. And some freshly ground black pepper. and back in our 275-degree oven for another 45 minutes. And 45 minutes later, here's our final product. And look at that, pretty interesting. Feels pretty firm. Actually feels very much just the way a beef roast would feel. We're going to let this cool for 30 minutes. Okay, this came out of the oven after 90 minutes at 275, turning it once, rebasting it, then bringing it out and cooling it for 30 minutes. And now the whole process altogether takes about 5.5, 6 hours. I fell asleep before we got to this stage, so this went into the refrigerator overnight, and it's now the next day. I'm going to show you how it looks. This is one of the roasts. It's uncut, and it really looks nice, doesn't it? It has a nice color, really, and it feels nice and firm. It feels like a corned beef. I've got a little sliver of it over here. You've got the other one. I've already cut it, and I've already tasted a little bit of it, as you can see here, but look at that. It's actually marbled with the coconut oil that's congealed. Here's the piece I cut off. Really looks a lot like corned beef to me. Now, I'm not trying to fool anyone. This is not, for me, this doesn't have to absolutely be exactly like corned beef, but let me just show you how it slices. Look at this. And they've got a nice thin slice, cut it on the diagonal, try to keep it all together here. But you can get a really thin slice just like with meat. Look at how nicely that comes off and how great that looks. Right? For a plant-based product, I think that's pretty impressive. I also think it's time to give it a taste. Now I've got it two ways here. I've got cold right out of the refrigerator that I just sliced up in the last segment. I gotta say, I really like this product. This is the most similar to the texture of meat of any Seitan product that I've made so far. I think it's just delicious. I love the spice blend in it. I really love everything about it. The only thing I think I would change is the amount of garlic powder. I think I'd double that. I really want a stronger garlic flavor here. Now I also heated some up for a few seconds in the microwave just to see if that was any different. It actually is a little bit. Of course, it has a fatty sheen to it and pulls apart just like thinly sliced meat does. Oh, yeah. Really just delicious and barely any more trouble than actually making your own corned beef from scratch. I think it's just delicious and a wonderful replacement for that. Although again, like I said earlier, I'm not trying to fool anybody. One advantage to using Seitan, making this 2 pounds of Seitan, each loaf is about a pound, costs about $2.50 for both of them. So this is really a cheap substitute for meat. At my grocery store, really nice corned beef is about $6.99, $7.99 a pound. You do the math. Anyway, I think this is a great alternative. It was really fun to make. Very interesting. I hope you liked it. I also hope that you will like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Helps my channel grow, and it helps you find my videos, especially if you click on the notification bell. You'll be notified every time I upload, which is usually a couple of times a week. Thanks for joining us here today at Tim Talks Cooking. We'll catch you next time.